All right, if you're getting ready for the UGC NET exam, you already know that the teaching aptitude section is tricky. It's not about just memorizing a bunch of definitions, right? It's really about understanding how we learn. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the actual science of learning to give you a solid framework to really master these concepts for good.
So let's kick things off with a question that I bet feels a little too real. You spend weeks, maybe months, cramming all these facts and theories, but then you sit down for the exam. You see those complex, application-based questions, and it all just kind of falls apart. Why does that keep happening?
Well, the answer comes down to this idea of shallow knowledge. This is what happens when you learn facts in isolation. They're like these little, separate islands of information floating in your brain. You might be able to define a term, sure, but you don't really see how it connects to the bigger picture. And under pressure, those disconnected facts are always the first thing to get jumbled up or just gone.
And that right there is what we call the shallow knowledge trap. It's a super common pitfall for students. But here's the good news. Once you understand what it is, you can start building a much deeper, more solid foundation for teaching aptitude.
So how do we get out of this trap? Well, we need a better game plan than just collecting random facts. Think of it like you're climbing a learning ladder. It's a structured way to move from that shallow memorization up to deep, useful knowledge you can actually apply.
And here's the most crucial point. The goal of higher education, and what the NET exam is really testing, isn't just what you know, but how you think. The blueprint for building these thinking skills is a classic in educational science called Bloom's taxonomy. Let's just think of it as the rungs on our learning ladder. Okay, so Bloom's taxonomy gives us 6 levels of thinking, starting right at the bottom. First up, you've got remembering. That's just recalling facts. Then you climb up to understanding, where you can actually explain ideas. Next is applying, where you can use what you know in a new situation. Now this is where it gets interesting. The top 3 levels are analyzing, which is breaking info down, evaluating, making judgments about it, and right at the very top, creating, coming up with something totally new.
Now look closely at this. The bottom 3 levels, remembering, understanding, and applying, that's your foundation. We call those lower order thinking skills, or LOTS. But to really crush the NET exam, you have to master the top 3, the higher order thinking skills, or HOTS. The whole exam is basically designed to see if you can operate up in that higher order zone.
All right, so we've got the levels of thinking mapped out. But how do we actually develop those skills? Well, that's where the levels of teaching come in. By lining these two things up, we can finally make that leap from just memorizing to truly mastering the material.
This slide connects all the dots perfectly. See, down at the bottom, you have memory level teaching, or MLT. That's all about rote memorization, and it lines up exactly with Bloom's remembering level. Move up a step and you have understanding level teaching, or ULT. This is about building connections, and it targets understanding and applying. But the real goal for higher ed is the reflective level, RLT. This is what develops critical thinking and problem solving, and it builds those top-tier skills of evaluating and creating.
But which of these teaching levels is the best one? The answer is, it totally depends on the student. And since you're studying for the UGC NET, that makes you an adult learner. And you know what? That changes everything. To be effective, you've got to know your audience, and in this case, that audience is you.
This brings us to a really important distinction. Pedagogy, which is the science of teaching kids, versus andragogy, the science of teaching adults. As adult learners, you're not really motivated by grades. You're motivated from within, by wanting to apply this stuff in the real world. You see yourself as a self-directed person, not some passive listener. This means adult learners are basically wired and ready for that highest level of teaching, the reflective level.
Okay, so if the goal is this high-level, self-directed learning, what tools can we actually use to get there? Well, luckily, today's educational world is packed with modern systems designed for exactly this kind of thing. And this is where India's big digital initiatives are such a game changer. You've got platforms like Swayam for flexible online courses and Swayam Prabha for accessible content right on your TV. You have virtual labs and e-yantra for hands-on, project-based learning. See the pattern? All of these tools empower that self-directed, problem-solving approach that defines adult learning. Of course, you can't have teaching and learning without evaluation, but we need to totally rethink what evaluation is really for. It's not just about getting a score. Like this quote says, its real purpose, its highest function, is to be a tool that helps us correct ourselves and get better. So how do we give feedback that actually works? There's this brilliant model by Hattie and Timperley that boils it down to 3 simple questions.
Feed up is about clarifying the goal. Where am I going? Feed back is about the present. How am I doing right now? And maybe most important is feed forward, which gives you a plan. Where do I go next? It shifts the whole conversation from judgment to action.
So what's the one golden thread that connects everything we've talked about? Bloom's taxonomy, reflective teaching, adult learning, all these digital tools, this new way of thinking about feedback. They are all designed to build one master skill, metacognition. That's just a fancy word for thinking about your own thinking, the ability to plan, monitor, and adjust your own learning. This is the engine that drives a truly independent learner.
And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. Take a hard look at your own study habits. Are you stuck at the bottom of the ladder, just studying so you can repeat information back? Or are you actively climbing towards the top, learning how to analyze, evaluate, and ultimately to create new understanding for yourself? That choice, right there, is the key to mastering not just this exam, but the art of learning itself.